So before you jumped onto the wonderment of 24, how does a North Midwestern
South
girl,
Dakota. Were you about to say North Dakota?
Well, no,
I'm
you went to
hurt deep
Northwestern.
I went to Northwestern. Yes, I did go to Northwestern.
How do you end up taking Japanese and end up going overseas?
Well, I'm from a little town in South Dakota of 1,000 people in the middle of nowhere called Custer, South Dakota. And I got a scholarship to Northwestern. And my first week at Northwestern, I rode an escalator for the first time and went into a revolving door for the first time. I was from rural South Dakota. So I hadn't, Northwestern is a lot of kids that went to private school. Yeah. And I came from more of a working class background, so I didn't get to go to the Alps skiing. So after I graduated, I knew I wanted to go into theater and be a playwright, but I thought I was going to have an internship at the Goodman Theater, and I was so excited about it. But on a lark, as a joke with a friend, she went to interview on the JET program, which is a very serious teaching English in Japan. And I went with her and joked with her. They're like, who's the prime minister of Japan? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, one word to describe every Japanese person. And I'm like, shorter than me, and for some reason they thought it was a good idea to send me there anyway. So I ended up getting offered that job and taking it in very rural Japan. They saw where I grew up and they're like, ooh, she can handle it. So I went and lived in a place where, royalty used to be sent when they were being, what is it when you send royalty away, when you never come back?
Wow.
Yeah, exiled. Exiled. I was sent to a place where Japanese royalty was, exiled. So that was fun.
Wow.
Yeah. I also really love sci-fi, and I'm a total sci-fi geek, so I'm very into samurai. Yeah. And so I was very into all that, and so I had to take lots of martial arts when I was there, and there was a lot of geeking out happening in Japan.
What martial arts do you know?
Taekwondo and karate, but not that well. I mean, I couldn't, if I was attacked, it might all come back in a desperate state. But yeah, it was fun. Kendo, where you with the swords.
Yeah.
Pretend swords.
Yeah.
They look like sticks, but
they're real.
They're real sticks.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, it was just fascinating when I was looking up. I wasn't about to bring up your South Dakota
I'm from
date.
South Dakota. That's fine. I'm not ashamed. I own it.
So this kind of sparked a love of traveling, though. You've traveled quite a bit from then.
Yeah. I backpacked around the world.
Yeah. So you're not stuck in any rural area now. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, you learn a lot. Like Ron Moore, the creator of Battlestar, he's from a really small town in Northern California. So I think sometimes if you're in the wilderness and you have a lot of time on your hands, you get introspective and start imagining worlds.
So how did you actually then dive into writing out in TV land? How did you get that first gig with 24?
Well, I now get to bring up the Austin Film Festival because when I was a playwright in New York, a poor playwright in New York, I decided that I needed to make some money somehow, and I didn't want to do it being a paralegal. I wanted to actually work, sort of spend my day doing what I love, So I went to the Austin Film Festival, and there I met a TV writer-producer who said, "You can talk." Literally, he was like, "Pitch me your plays," and I pitched him my plays, and he said, "You can talk, you should be a TV writer," because TV writers spend a lot of time pitching. And I was like, "Does it pay?" And he's like, "It pays," because that was a big concern for me. So I packed up my Camaro, and I drove out to LA. And how did I get a job on 24?
Yeah.
So, to give you an idea, so I was a playwright. I was 28 when I came out to LA, and I didn't have any money. And so I did and even though I had an MFA in playwriting and had been teaching, while I was in grad school, I decided to just get a job. So I went to a temp agency and I typed really fast, and they said, if you want to be a writer, you should work at an agency. So I got a job at CAA with Kathy White, who's still there, who's now still a friend. And I was the world's worst agent's assistant. I was terrible. I was really good with the writers, but I was, I don't know, I was just a really creative person. And it was like, but I was there 4 months, and my agent boss sat down with me. She said, I love your writing, and you're a terrible writer's assistant. And this is a terrible agent's assistant. And this is the time of year when things are dead. So I need you gone. And other assistants at CAA helped me get, what happens is, it's really good to work at an agency because all the business goes through there, and you find out things very, very first thing. And there was some little-known guys who didn't have a huge track record at the time, who had a pilot that wasn't as well regarded, to be honest, because it had too many, at least in that agency, because it had too many phone calls. It had a ton of phone calls, and they were like, and this was back in 2000. So, now everyone's always on the phone. But back in 2000, it was like, how do you shoot this show? It's too many logistics. Anyway, they had a showrunner's assistant available, and I found out the instant. My friend literally stood in her seat with her headset on and said, Anne, job for you, now! And I 2 days later went on the interview, and then I was Joel Cernell and Bob Cochran's assistant for the shooting of the pilot of 24. And I got to sit there and see how they solved the phone call problem, which was an editing solve, which was those boxes, conceptual boxes, which ended up making the visual of the show, which goes to show sometimes a challenge ends up, you end up coming up with this amazing creative solution to solve it.
Almost gold, yeah. It was.
Yeah.
So then how do you get connected to Mr. Moore and that whole legacy? Is it through those guys? How do you jump to the next couple of steps?
Well, TV is an apprenticeship program, much like, I don't know, like being a surgeon or being an architect. You have to do you don't have to. There's many ways in. I went in the apprenticeship route, which is I was the showrunner's assistant. I ended up producing shorts affiliated with with 24. I ended up being head researcher and talking to the FBI and CIA all the time. And
Wait, you were a fact checker for what was really?
I wasn't checking the facts. They were go out and figure out how the heck this is done, kind of thing.
So cool.
Yeah, with torture things, you name it. It was terrible, but fun, but terrible. There's a guy named Ted Cofell, season 1, who's tortured, and I came up with all of that. And so they're like, "Hey, let's name him after you." I'm like, "Thank you, thank you." But basically, you sort of get a bird's eye view. You work with the writers. They'll be like, "I need some dialogue on this," and then they'll adapt it or base what they're writing on it, or they'll say how, what would the impact be of actually a nuclear bomb going off near LA. And so then when you're on 24, you get to interview all the nuclear physicists you want and visit nuclear sites, and you get to visit LA's emergency preparedness system.
Did you get top secret clearance because of this job?
I had clearance already. I worked with Senator Daschle's office in D.C., but I didn't have to get clearance to do the job. You just do the job and hope you don't get arrested for all the searches you're doing. But it was a really cool job. It was, these assistant jobs, I went in with a graduate degree, 28 years old, lots of writing samples, went into assistant job. I made $500 a week working for people who make millions a year, but you're paying for what you get from the job is so much more. You get access, you get exposure. I think of it now, I tell people television is a train that runs quickly. You write quickly and you do everything kind of quickly. You just make decisions. And so in order to get on that train, you have to run next to it for a while. You have to figure out, pace yourself to it and then jump on. It's much more challenging to just, start in television and not really know how it works. So in that program of what I just described to you, eventually they offer you a script. On such a huge hit show, it's much harder to get a script.
Yeah.
But after a while, I got a script, and that was my first script. And then I told my agent, there's one show I want to be on, and it's Battlestar Galactica. get me on that show, and he bought my agent Pete Stone with ICM Partners. He's now a partner, but back he was my my only agent I've ever had back when he was an assistant and I was an assistant. He was my boss's assistant. That's a good way to get an agent when you're a writer's assistant, if people are interested in figuring out how to get agents. I talked to my agent, my bosses, so I'm at a desk, I'm picking up the phone, on the other end, there's the agent, but before the agent gets on the line, it's the agent's assistant. And so Pete and I became friends, constantly talking, and then I was like, I have a sample and I have a bunch of plays. You want to read some stuff? And he was like, I'd love to. And then he's like, and that's how that sort of works.
So cool.
Yeah, it's access. It's really hard to get access to, high-level TV producers and stuff. And if you can see them at work, it's kind of gold. Yeah.
Did you go into Battlestar with story ideas? I mean, obviously at Battlestar, I think for most people, that's when your name kind of popped up. I mean, you're an award-winning writer because that show. How does that come about? Are you told we should do this? I mean, like, how did Pegasus come about?
How did Pegasus? What a great question. Yeah. I love Pegasus. Michelle Forbes at her awesomest, I would say. So Pegasus, so what happened was when you're an entry-level writer on a staff on a cable show, here's cable in the imaginary world. Cable, you're cable, and here's network. And if you're working in network as a lower-level writer, you have a certain role that you need to fulfill in the room, and that's a room of like 12 people, and you need to listen, learn, and do whatever they ask you to do, and be a bottomless wellspring of ideas. So it's your job to sit there. It's, you look for ideas, you listen, and then you pitch when you can, or when the room's not running, you pull aside you try to find a mentor, someone you can pre-pitch to and say, what do you think of this idea? Oh, that's great. So then later, in the flurry of pitching, this high-level writer can go, oh, hey, Anne pitched this thing to me a couple days ago, Anne. And they sort of foam the runway for your pitches, and that's how that works. But Pegasus, Ron really wanted to do Pegasus. Pegasus was an original episode of Battlestar. Mm-hmm. And so I watched it, and then we did something very different. But it's still a good idea to see, what the sort of concepts are behind it. For me, I'm the reason why I love sci-fi and genre is because it's a way to make a metaphor a reality. Mm-hmm. Having worked on 4 years, you're constantly looking for who is the enemy. Is it some Middle Eastern country? Is it some African nation? And then you have to really realistically research. And it was very freeing to me to be like, it's a metaphor. They're Cylons. What does it mean to be human? And you get to really look at that. And so a lot of my big pitch for Ron about Pegasus was, the goal was for me, I think Ron really came at it as we've got two leaders who's found a way to survive, and they found a way to survive in totally different ways. One is more like a democratic, like everybody gets a chance to have their opinion, and the other is like more autocratic, like my way. And for that to be the woman, I think he was very interested in. And to see what it would do to Adama to have sort of an alpha chick sort of kicking him down, and having Mary have to watch that. Sorry, I'm referring to this actress's name, but the president of the colonies have to watch that happen, and the sort of pissing contest and the leadership issues. I think he was really, and I was very excited, obviously, because I love writing strong women. Actually, I don't ever mean to. I just end up writing these women characters. But the thing that I was most passionate about that script was Six, and how Six is everybody's friend on one ship, and our main, the Baltar's in love with her, and then on the other ship, she's not even considered human, and she's raped. And so then they take that value system of this other ship and apply it to ours, and threaten ours being, Battlestar Galactica, applying Pegasus's morality to ours. And I was trying to trying very hard to make people feel something toward and look at how do we treat prisoners of war, and how do we dehumanize people, and what happens when we have the wonderful thing about Battlestar's metaphor is that there are multiple copies, and so there's a version that we can love, and then there's another version that can be treated that way. And I don't know, the hope is that by taking it away from any sort of, I don't know, racial or ethnic situation going on in present day, it allows people sort of a latitude to feel and lean in more, and then they're in. Once they're feeling and they're in, then you got them, and then you can really be disturbing. But when I did Pegasus, I also broke the next episode, which was written by Michael Reimer, but I did story by of that. That was when we were working on things like the Resurrection Ship, and there was a lot of fun conceptual things going on.
It was fun to watch it for sure.
Was it?
Yeah.
Sorry. See, I talk a lot.
I've got to ask, since you've had such an interesting career in that you've joined shows that have already, like Smallville, where you join in the back end, or
that was cool.
Other shows where you start from the beginning. As a writer, and as a producer on those shows, because you started producing from Chuck, do you approach it differently, or is it the same process for you?
It's totally different. When you're starting on a brand new show that's just starting up, it's almost like a startup company, where the way someone randomly does something ends up being show canon for how it's always done. Yeah. So it's really important the decisions you make in the beginning. Like how much are we going to stop and talk about scenes before we shoot them? How much are we going to revise during production? How much are we going to involve lower level writers in producing and sending them up to, let's say you're shooting in Vancouver. Do we send lower level writers up? Don't we? Do we send writers at all? Don't we? All these decisions that you make in the beginning, which are kind of sometimes just putting out fires. I mean, when you start a new show, it's really it's like you're in a boat and you're paddling and you're in rapids. And it's like lean, paddle, and everyone has to be. And then in a cable show, all writers get to do an exhaustive amount of writing and producing, and in network it's a bigger staff, so sometimes it ends up being heavier with high-level writers doing more producing. Oh, wait, okay. Anyway, so, but yeah, it's very different. Well, when I stepped into Smallville, it was awesome. They're like, these are your duties. And I got a list of things they wanted me to do. They're like, run the room, and when so-and-so's not here, and this is your role, this is how these meetings work. And it's all, on Smallville, I joined, and I was on season 8 and 9, which was so fun to end a series. Super fun to end a long-running series, by the way.
Did you know going in that they were going to wrap on the 9th? Mm-mm. Okay. I was just curious.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. But it was interesting because everyone on that show had always been on that show, and then I was coming in, and me and Jordan Hawley, he and I came in, and we were like the first outsiders that had been on that show in a long time. And so culturally, every show has its own specific culture, has its own specific way things are done. And if it's a long-running show, sometimes people are like, this is the only way it's done. But I give Brian Peterson and Kelly Saunders, who are running Smallville, a lot of credit, because they came in and they're like, shake us up. So it was fun. I would pitch something, and everyone in the room would be like, oh, we don't do that. She can't see Superman. And then Kelly and Brian were like, maybe this is time for her, because everything's wrapping up. So it's fun.
They still have the he can't fly thing all the time, though. Just don't have them do that. I've got to then ask, I mean, you obviously jumped from cable to studio, or big studio network. Uh-huh. As far as being comfortable in the situation, do you feel more comfortable writing for network or more comfortable with cable? I mean, are you thinking about the audience? Or are you thinking about just the story? I mean, what motivated you? So much. Well, it just had to do with, I think at the time, it's so interesting because cable used to be very different than it is now. Yeah. Cable used to be the place where it was exciting to go. There was the upside of you get to do a lot of writing and you get to do a lot of producing, which is great when you're a new writer.
and you get to be edgy, which is cool, but the orders are usually shorter, so that's like an order is an episode order. So 8 episodes have been ordered for a show, or 13 or 22. Network is usually 22. 24 we used to have an order of 24. So I really enjoyed working in cable Battlestar. I love working in Battlestar, but network is has its own challenges and its own positive aspects too. Like, I'm sort of learning that cable, because now I'm back working in cable again, and what's really interesting is there's a little bit more polishing the Fabergé egg in cable, and a little bit more like in network, like go, go, go. Like I co-wrote 5 scripts one year on Revolution, which is basically constantly writing. Constantly writing and produce constantly. In cable, a writer will like write 1 or 1.5 scripts a year. So you see there's a tempo difference too.
Have you fallen in love with a particular character for each show?
Yes. I fall passionately in love with characters I work on because they're so much a reflection of you. Every member of the staff brings their own voices and personalities to characters, even though you're trying to write to the voice of the show and the voice of the showrunner. Characters do take on a life of their own, and you can sort of viscerally, that you have sort of a avatar experience sometimes.
Can I just name a show and see what character you give me back?
Yes.
I mean, obviously.
That I've worked on.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah. We won't start with Battlestar. We'll get there last because I think I know. But let's start with Chuck, because that's the most kind of unique of the shows, I think.
Oh, Chuck's girlfriend was very fun to write for. She was really fun. She's an amazing actress, by the way.
Yeah.
Help me with names, because I just got off the flight, so I'm tired. Yes, yeah. Yvonne.
Yes.
Yvonne. She's fun.
Fighter.
Yes.
24.
Oh, I don't have one for 24.
What about a villain? You never fell in love with like a particular villain or country of origin, or?
No. 24 would be the one, maybe not. Let me think.
I mean, you have a character name for you, so.
I know, Ted Cofell. Yeah. Let's count him in that. I don't know.
Well, let's get to the big one. Obviously, Battlestar is the show that I think.
Well, can I volunteer some?
Of course.
Lois Lane was amazing to write for in Smallville. Lois Lane, so fun.
And at the end of the show's run, it's interesting because I think that's the Lois so different than the Lois that obviously started the show.
Yes. Well, what happens is as Superman's, as the Clark Kent's life starts bleeding and everything's into one another and starts getting messier, she becomes such an important character. So it's the love story too. Yeah, Lois Lane's was awesome to write for. Who else?
Ooh, Revolution, yeah.
Yeah, Revolution. Revolution was very fun. I would say I'm so tired. I just got off a flight. The blonde woman and her scenes. You'll have to help me. Shoot. See, that tells you something right there. After hundreds of episodes of television. But there was usually what it is the character that suffers the most, or the character that is the most damaged is the one that's, for me, the most fun to write. Because they use different tactics. Like on Battlestar, Ty. Ooh. Ty is so fun to write. He's so fun because he breaks all the rules. He says all the subtext that no one wants to say. Super fun. Or Starbuck. Starbuck's the character I loved writing the most. She's amazing. And again, she's very broken, very sort of struggled with alcohol, struggled with oppositional defiance issues. But it was really fun because I interviewed an actual jet fighter pilot, female F-15 jet fighter pilot, and she was I brought her in to talk to the whole staff, and I was like, there's going to be a room full of people sort of hitting you with questions. She's like, I got this. She walked in, and she, was 5 feet tall. She just owned the room. She was like alpha male times 1,000, alpha female times 1,000, and everyone was just like, oh my goodness. She was amazing. So channeled a lot. Had a lot of fun writing Starbuck. Yeah. And in Timeless, I had a blast last year writing the dynamic between Matt Lanter's character and that his character I really enjoyed writing because he struggled with PTSD. His Alamo episode. In the Alamo, he thinks he's going to die there because he just can't leave another man behind. And he has PTSD flashbacks to when he had to take some intel out and had to leave his crew behind. That was really very fun.
So, separating yourself from the shows, do you get time to watch other shows? Do you get time to only read other things? I mean, like, what do you do when you're not immersed into the show world?
Well, it depends on what kind of show I'm working on. Generally, I don't have time to watch a lot of television, to be honest. And so I'll get sucked into, like, Game of Thrones, and I'll try desperately to keep up. Like, I love that show. Like, right now, I'm working with a writer who was on Breaking Bad, and so George Mastras, so I'm... Hi, George. He's like, what? And he wrote on Breaking Bad, so I just decided I actually never watched an episode of Breaking Bad because I was so busy, as I have 2 daughters and, very busy. So I just am like watching them all at once. I'm on the final season now. So I have a little bit of time to watch TV. I try really hard to, though, because I think that there's a lot of good TV out there right now. And I try to at least hit one episode of something I've heard is really good. Black Mirror is my favorite. Yeah. Orphan Black is so good, but Black Mirror is my favorite.
Those crazy Brits, they know what they're doing. Yeah.
I know, they're amazing.
Did marriage or having kids impact you as a writer or producer in any way? Totally. And my older daughter has special needs. So it was really a challenge. I mean, it's almost like, I would say that it's the biggest challenge of my life, but I feel like I got through it. I think that the key is having a very supportive partner. My husband, Cofell Saunders, is a concept designer and illustrator. He designed the Iron Man suit, and he's he's a futurist. He's amazing. And he and I sort of made a deal that we would try to 50-50 it. So when I'm busy hardcore, he tries to dial down to working from home or part-time or just staying home with the kids, and then we'll flip. And because both of our jobs will have gaps, there's always some gaps. Or I guess we've been able to have gaps because both of us work. And so, for example, just to give you an example of parenting, very specific example, like this last season on Timeless, I was probably in Vancouver producing 90 days of the year. And so, my husband would bring the kids up to visit, and he was working part-time during that time. And then I went down and was done in, February, and he amped up on a show. And then I was working shorter hours on a cable show. It was just easier. And then he amped back up again, and I'm down. And so we try to do that. Does that make sense? Where we balance out. So one of us tries to be more present and be the parent, the point parent. And that's been good for us because then I know how hard that job is. And I do think that being a parent has made me a much better writer and a much faster writer and more focused writer. Much better at my job, oddly. You think it'd be tougher with all the extra baggage, but it's obviously made you hone your skills.
It kind of makes you're like a knife sharpened. You're like a blade. Seriously though, I'm not messing around. You know what I mean? It's let's do this quick, and it's it also, there's nothing that raises the stakes of your entire life like parenting. Having a child, it's like your heart walking around outside of yourself. And so that is really good for writing because it sort of shows you how you can make a character vulnerable, and it's made me a better writer for sure.
On I'll just bring up the city of Austin because not just the wonderfulness of AFF and how it impacted your life.
It very much impacted my life. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's why I come back.
Well, tell us more about that. I mean, do you seek it out or do they come to you? How does this arrangement work? I've always been curious.
I don't remember exactly, but I think
because like Shane Black just shows up. I think he lives in their press suite and he does what he wants to do. But like, you know what I mean? Like, how does that symbiotic relationship work with AFF?
Well, what I did was I think I just expressed interest, and they were like, "Sure, come." And I like to teach because I taught. I was a professor for 9 seconds before I became a TV writer, and I do think it's important to give back, especially now that I have children. I think it's really important to give back. And I also think that it's easy as a writer to sort of hide away. I like to hide away. It's actually kind of very challenging for me to get out in front of people and talk to you like this. Very challenging, but I try to make myself do it because I think that I think I would say that to any writer. It's like it's good to sort of get yourself out there and try to engage with people and talk about the writing process, because every time I do this thing where I run a mock writer's room where they have 11 writers that are second rounders or above, or 5 writers or something, I don't know how many, and then there's an audience, and I'm like, all right, let's break this pilot, and we break a pilot in 2.5 hours, and I use all my tricks to do it quickly, and we sort of demonstrate, and but it's about process, not product. It's about, this is the writer's room process, and talk about the rules of the writer's room, but mostly it's just we do it, and then you sort of see what happens as it happens. I'm doing it 2 times this year. I did it once last year. I'm doing it twice because I guess people had fun. It was really fun.
Have you taken anyone from any of these times at the festival into a writing room with you later on?
You know, I've never been in the position to hire somebody from the Austin Film Festival, but I have continued relationships with several writers that have kept in touch with me, and I've given them notes on their material.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole point, right? Like, to engage and share what you know, and I think I learn something too every time. Because, you know, when I've done it as a class, like as a guest lecturer at like USC or something, or USCSB, like this mock writer's room, you get certain kinds of stories from the students, like you know, based on their life experience. What's really interesting about the Austin crew here is that the people around the table are highly diverse and highly self-selecting. You know, they're not just in school, they're like got in a car or they got on a plane and here they are, and they won something in a contest and here they are and they're going for it, you know, and they're not all 21. And so I actually was really impressed last year, not surprisingly so, because it's the Austin Film Festival. But I was really impressed with the diversity of story, the diversity of backgrounds and story, which is a lesson for me, which is higher diversity and higher age differences, you know, higher all kinds, as much diversity as you can, and then you get a diversity of story.
Yeah. So kind of final question. Whatever happened to your Camaro?
Okay, so there was some hail that happened in South Dakota when I went home, and so I came back, and on 24 they said they'd paint it for me for free, but then it was really rainy and the paint was kind of peely. And so my uncle offered to buy it back for me.
So it's still in the family?
It's still in the, oh yes, this is a very cool Camaro, totally cool.
Took you coast to coast, right?
Multiple times.
Wow.
I know, it's a cool Camaro. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I told you I wouldn't ask about any prom dates, but the Camaro thing, I think, is cool.
And right now I'm working on a show we've been developing all summer called The Boys. I've been working with Eric Kripke, who I've worked with for 5 years. And we're waiting right now at this very moment to hear whether or not the show's being picked up by Amazon. So I should get a call today or tomorrow.
Is this your first foray into, how do I put it, Amazon, Hulu, Netflix? I mean, a different...
Yeah, I mean, it's Eric's baby, this project, but he and I have been working on it. I helped him with the pilot on it ages ago, and not ages, but a couple years ago. So I'm really excited.
Sci-fi?
Yeah, it's genre high concept. You'll just have to wait and see.
Can't wait.
But
Seen everything else you've done. So yeah.
it's really, really edgy, which is very exciting because I like bouncing between network and cable, but I'm really excited to sort of get to follow my friend into this new
new
show.
world, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, I can't wait to hear what happens. I'll definitely try and keep an eye.
Yes.
And have a wonderful rest of your time here in wonderful Austin.
It's going to be awesome.